I'd like to get your perspective. We had so much news going into the conference and so much news over the last 3 days really generated from right here. How has your sort of perspective shifted coming into the conference on Friday to now, Sunday?
Well, we knew, of course, that the new U.S. administration has a new view on things, so we knew there was more ask on Europe. What was a bit surprising was the speech of the Vice President, who was not talking that much about foreign policy, but he was talking about values, he was talking about elections, he was talking about also right-wing parties here. And this was almost a kind of a shockwave there, because people are wondering, do we still have a common base, a transatlantic common value base? So that was, I think, the one surprising thing that's in the headlines, the speech. And then, of course, you have a lot about the reaction to it. And I find encouraging the speeches that European leaders gave. A very strong High Representative, Kaja Kallas, who actually, this morning called for a meeting of foreign ministers. We have a meeting planned for European leaders in France. So I think a bit this wake-up call that we got, I think it has arrived at the audience where it should be.
But we've been talking about a wake-up call at least since November, and so I'm trying to understand a bit more concretely what waking up means for these European leaders. And you as a diplomat also understanding that basically, because I think for a long time people were very optimistic about Trump, to say let's wait and see.
Yes.
After this weekend, it's hard to ignore the president's sort of approach, particularly to Europe. How does the European framework need to change about how it thinks about its relationship with the U.S.?
No, I'm still, to a certain degree, optimistic. I think there is no questioning of the nuclear umbrella of the Americans over Europe. I think that's clear. Also, what you hear in the corridors from Democratic and Republican senators, they are still, positive, but you feel this reluctance also by Republicans, to speak out, because they have godfather sitting in Washington. So for the Europeans, it was clear before. I really hope and expect that the message has arrived. Kaja Kallas yesterday, in her speech where she got the Kleist Award, founder of Munich Security, spoke about Munich 1938. Referring to the president giving up, like Chamberlain, give your territory, and try to somehow, make Russia, agree on something, and this is the challenge.
And you mentioned 38, and mentioned an event that took place here in Munich as well. Trump's approach to Russia, do you consider it to be pragmatism or appeasement?
It looks a bit like appeasement from here. On the other hand, Trump doesn't want to be seen as a loser in a deal. And knowing Putin from many meetings, having been diplomatic advisor to Chancellor Merkel, he knows how to flatter people, but he is like children, he smells weakness. And I think what he is smelling right now is something he likes. And but then when Trump finds out that he's been taken for a ride, he may react and say, not with me. So this is...
And some of the weakness that he's smelling is coming from European capitals, particularly because of military underspending, all of these sorts of things. How does Europe, you say that the leaders are meeting in Paris, how does Europe reassert itself? How does it get a seat at the table in Ukraine, or has that train left the station?
No. You cannot just say, I want to be at the table. You have to bring something to the table. In 2014, when Russia invaded for the first time, Angela Merkel and François Hollande took the occasion, invited Poroshenko in the Normandy beaches and Vladimir Putin, and pushed them to sit around the table. And there was Merkel and Hollande in the driver's seat, coordinating with the Europeans, with President Obama at the time. We don't have that right now, so we have to take the initiative. We have to put on the table, this is what we think about the role of Europe. When you talk about security guarantees, what is our plan? So we bring something to the table.
There is something of a leadership void, I think, on the European stage. This is part of the problem, I think, in having a unified voice in response to the United States. Emmanuel Macron has clearly been trying to be that leader for a time. Is he that leader? And if not, who is?
No, You know, the future German Chancellor, I can say that, I think, now not being in politics anymore, will be Friedrich Merz. And he has been a member of the European Parliament. He is from Adenauer's party, who knows that you have to work closely with Germany and France. And I think he's ready to follow in the footsteps and say, we have to do it together. We have to do it together with France. We have to take Poland on board. I think also Great Britain on foreign policy. And then when these leaders take the lead and you have a strong EU with Kaja Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen, I think we can put something on the table. We have to have more self-confidence. You cannot imagine how many people want to come here, want to come to this conference, want to come and say, Europe, you have the means. Why are you you're a bit all this pessimistic? You know, Europe is a strong actor.
And I want to return quickly to something you mentioned about JD Vance's speech here in this very building, basically talking about common values. And you question whether or not there are those common values as there once were between the United States and Europe. Do we still have those values in common? In which ways do we not?
Well, the Vice President spoke about free speech and spoke about that it was incredible that we, were canceling, information and not allowing, the right-wing party here. And it was very interesting what the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said. Yes, there is a human right on free speech, but there are limits to this. There's limits when you spread hatred and when you spread damaging disinformation. And this is something where we disagree, where this administration says whatever is said, it's okay. While I say you cannot allow, disinformation to be spread, hurting people and bringing violence and contribute to a polarization which is bad for a society.
And just as a final question, I'd like to get your perspective as a career diplomat, student of history, someone who's lived through very closely. There's a difference between the sort of the news and then how we see it in history. Can you situate us in this moment in terms of, are we seeing a paradigm shift in terms of geopolitics from multilateralism to basically American unilateralism? Can you put that into context for us?
I think the danger is there. Germany and Europe, why do we have the longest history of peace in Europe? Because in Europe, Adenauer and de Gaulle, the founders of the European Union, they said from now onwards, we don't go to the battlefield anymore. When we have differences, we go to Brussels, we go to the European Court in Luxembourg, and we resolve our problems. This is what brought freedom, peace to Europe. And we wanted to have this on the global level with the UN Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And now you see countries like China, you see countries like Russia, and now the US not respecting the UN Charter anymore. And there we are right now at a defining moment in history. And I think countries like Germany, other countries, we have so many countries from Africa, Asia, Latin America here who believe in the UN Charter. I think it's time now for also medium, small sized countries to get together in kind of an alliance for multilateral and see we want to insist on the rule of law, on the UN Charter. And my hope is that also at some stage when we have multipolarization, US no longer the biggest player, but seeing there are others, at some stage I hope that Americans will see maybe it's in our interest also to go by the rule of law.